call this work session to order. Our only topic of business today is this application for AK Alchemist. Ms. Wynn Pearson, you want to start us off?
Certainly, Mr. Chair.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Chris, I do this every time. Start with introductions.
Becky Wynn Pearson, Municipal Attorney.
Forrest Dunbar.
Christopher Constant. Pete Peterson.
Great, for the record. And then when people come and actually talk, please identify yourself for the record. Go ahead, Ms. Wynn Pearson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. What I thought would made sense to do today would be to walk you quickly through the resolution that will be in front of you on Tuesday night and the various options it gives you and the parameters of what your options are Tuesday night. And then the applicant is represented here today and staff are here as well, so this would provide an opportunity for questions in advance of the public hearing on this matter on Tuesday night. As an initial matter, you have two different things in front of you right now. You have two AR 2018-186, and then you have an S version. The reason both of them are in front of you is because per Heidi's email this morning, there was an administrative error in the clerk's office, and the document that was included in your packet is completely the wrong document. It's not a correct one made it onto the agenda. It's the correct title, but it was the wrong document entirely. And so I have included for your reference, you got the correct document this morning. I also wanted to make sure you had a hard copy of the original version and of the S version that we'll run through today in this work session. This error does not create any kind of public notice issue, and I'll put that on the record on Tuesday night. This is a decision in a quasi-judicial matter, so you are not required to provide the findings and conclusions in advance. You could change them entirely on Tuesday night without having to do any kind of additional notice. And then further, even if this were a legislative action through an AR, you could, the correct version went in prior to the addendum deadline. The code does not require any additional notice. So in short, there was an administrative error. We are fine. These are the correct documents.
Thank you, Ms. Pearson. Let me interrupt you for just a second. Note for the record, we've been joined by Mr. Trainey and Mr. Croft. Thank you. Please continue.
Certainly. I would say if for any reason you are uncomfortable with proceeding on Tuesday, you certainly have the option to kick this another month down the road. Mr. Coffey and I talked about this morning. I don't know if the applicant will in any way ask for that, but that's certainly if you are in any way uncomfortable with the fact that there was that brief administrative error. What will be in front of you on Tuesday night is this S version that you have in front of you right now. And this was crafted, Assembly Council and I worked through this with the goal of providing you with pre-drafted language that addresses any of the four options that we see as being the possible outcomes of this public hearing. Pursuant to code, you do have 15 days from the date of the public hearing on a quasi-judicial matter to adopt your final written decision. So you don't have to make a decision on Tuesday night, but there is no regularly scheduled meeting of the Assembly within 15 days of Tuesday's meeting, and the July 4th holiday intervenes. And so in the interest of time and expedience, we attempted to capture the four options in the language of the resolution. And we envision you moving to amend by selecting one of those options and then making your decision on Tuesday night. You also have a corrected staff report in front of you for the record. The staff report that made it into your packet had outdated recommendations attached to it. So this packet in front of you right now is the completely updated packet of materials you should consider. The options that are in this S version, the first option is very simple, no further action taken. If you elect to take this option, the conditional use permit will expire by its terms as of next Tuesday night, or the date that you make this decision, and then the applicant would need to restart the process if they wanted to seek approval to continue to operate. Option number 2 is also relatively straightforward. That under that option you would continue or you would extend. I apologize, they're on page 2 of 5. You've got four boxes.
Note for the record, we've been joined by Mr. Weddleton.
And again, just to confirm, we're looking at the S version. You have both the standard version and the S version in front of you.
Okay, thanks, sir.
All right, so on page 2 of 5, again, option 1, take no action. The application expires. Option 2, continue the expiration date of the conditional use permit for a period of your choice. You have the power to continue this to extend it for a month or for 5 years. All of the terms that were in the original conditional use permit would remain in place under this option, and you would then revisit the application again at the end of that time period, pursuant to whatever the applicant asked for. Option number 3, you simply remove the expiration date from the existing conditional use permit, and all other terms of the existing conditional use permit remain in place. That the nuance here is that the existing conditional use permit has sort of extraordinary assembly review provisions built in, where you are allowed to call them back for administrative review, and it also contemplates the construction of a permanent structure on there eventually, and requests that there are updates, and allows you to call them in and ask for updates. So that would remain in there if you took this option. Option number 4 essentially is you granting a permanent conditional use permit that removes that intent to have a permanent structure on there eventually, and removes that extraordinary review. It just sort of flat out grants a permanent conditional use permit subject to certain conditions. Those conditions start on page 3, and conditions 1 through 7 are effectively boilerplate for any permit of this kind. There's a small tweak in the S version to point number 2, intended to clarify that you are approving the current configuration of their business, basically saying the deck, there was this sort of back and forth, is the deck too big, is the deck too small, where's the deck? You're saying your current deck is fine. The deck as presented in the site plan that came in with the application for this amendment, you'd be confirming that that's appropriate under that tweak to point 2. Points 8 through 15, so starting on page 4 of 5, those are the points that are not boilerplate, and they simply speak to some of the items that were requested in the applicant's application. Point number 8 is simply a reiteration of the code. The code, as currently drafted, does not permit public occupancy of mobile food units. You certainly have the power to amend the code through a different proceeding, but you can't do that now through this AR. So it just acknowledges that unless and until the code is changed, public occupancy of mobile food units is prohibited. Point 9 and point 10 are both carry forwards from your last decision from the AR 2015-261S, which originally granted this conditional use permit. You could certainly amend these or remove these, but these were things that the Assembly was concerned with in 2015 and added as conditions to this conditional use permit. Point 11, again, is simply a reiteration of the code. The applicant has asked to be able to hook up to water and sewer. That is prohibited by building code and by the Anchorage Food Code. You certainly have the power to change the code, but as you can't do it through this proceeding, so this draft states that they need to disconnect from those utilities unless and until the code is changed. Point 12 asks that the applicant resolve their outstanding notice of permit required and associated fines. The word resolve is key here, and the reason it's drafted that way is to state that the process for the applicant has asked that this body take action on those fines, and the appropriate course of action for those is to go through the process that's set by code. If they're violations of Title 23, things should go to the administrative hearing officer as appropriate. If there are requests for changes to the code, they should go to the building board. This body is not the appropriate body necessarily to resolve those issues, and you're not requiring them to pay the fines, you're just saying resolve them, figure it out with the right people. Point 13 addresses the applicant's request regarding the connexes on the property, and again, essentially is relatively open-ended. It says either remove them or make them comply with code. You can, some of those connex construction pieces, my understanding is, can be permitted, you can get a building permit for them and then they would be fine. I believe that they may be able to keep one as storage under the guidance issued by the building official. Again, this body isn't really the right body to resolve that. What you're saying is resolve it with the building official, and then you can continue to operate. And then,
sorry, Becky.
Yeah.
She can finish. I was going back, like I said, a question about point number 11.
do you want me to finish? 14 and 15, I have very little to say about them. 14 just says comply with the temporary sign code for banner signs, and 15 is boilerplate.
Thanks. So Pete and then John.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So on point number 11, and this is something we talked about in pretty decent detail when we were working on this a couple of years ago. whether he's going to be hooking up to water and sewer with a mobile food unit. And so if he did do that, is there an inspection required by some department? Plumbing department maybe, or
To
building
permit,
department?
are you saying if he does hook up or if he doesn't hook up? If he does,
Well, if he hooks up someone, it's only going out to check this to make sure it's hooked up so there wouldn't create some sort of problem anyways.
Can you identify yourself for the record?
Francis McLaughlin, Planning Department. So they're representatives of the Health Department and the Building Safety Division who deal with this. But I think what they would say is that a temporary structure, a movable mobile food unit, isn't intended to permanently connect to utilities.
yeah, under code they can't. So the problem is right now, if they want to be a mobile food unit, they can't connect to the utilities. Again, you could change the code. That's certainly something. I know this is a business model that is a lot of people are interested in. I went to a taco truck myself yesterday, but again, you'd have to change the code in order to allow that to happen. Right now, the code is very clear that they need to disconnect.
But if we did in fact change the code to allow this, somebody would be out there to inspect. Is that correct? You
I
think?
would defer to.
Possibly.
So when a building connects to utilities, there's inspections.
That's
Yeah.
what I thought. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson. Mr. Weddleton?
Just a couple broad. So you outlined there's 4 options. We have check boxes, and they're all mutually exclusive.
They are all mutually exclusive. I think you could certainly concoct a permanent CUP or a temporary CUP with different conditions. So you could also, there's other options that are not on this page. If you wanted to say, we'll give you an extension for 2 years and we're taking these conditions away and we're adding additional conditions, you can certainly do that. It's not pre-drafted, so we'd probably need to schedule, if that's where you want to go, we'd probably either need to try and, if you know in advance you'd like to propose something, we could draft a floor amendment and have it ready, or we could potentially schedule a special meeting within 15 days of the hearing to adopt that resolution.
Okay, this is kind of fun. So
Yeah.
then on the
Across.
4th option, we've got all these 15, and all of these, we say, oh, we don't like the 4 or something.
Mhm. Yeah, certainly.
So those aren't, but that would be going against current code. Is that right? On several
Well,
instances.
on some of them, I don't think you have the option, and my legal advice would be to you that you don't have the option to grant a waiver from Title 23. Someone who wants a waiver from Title 23 is, according to the code, goes to the building official to present their case, and then if they are unhappy with the decision of the building official, that decision goes to the building board, and then from there to Superior Court. So my legal advice would be you do not have the authority to grant some of these things. There's a different route provided in code, and that's the route people are supposed to take.
Can I add that, so this is an assembly resolution having to do with an alcohol conditional use, and that's not the same thing as an assembly ordinance, which, kind of like it enacts a law. This is about whether or not, what would be the conditions behind granting an alcohol conditional use approval, which is a little bit different in AR than in AO.
To follow up that, John? Or you?
I'm going to let that sink in.
Okay. So Mr. Croft and Mr. Trainee.
Okay, so I wanted to understand, and I think got behind me, what the current issues are. That is, where there are violations of the various things. So I won't get that, but that discussion that was just had, interesting. I mean, a conditional use permit is essentially saying to an alcohol licensee, if you want to serve alcohol, we want you to do or not do these other things.
Mm-hmm.
It isn't usually a vehicle, or maybe can't be a vehicle, to say, and you know those laws, you don't have to,
Yeah,
you
it
can
can't.
ignore them. So it's pluses, not sort of waivers. We want you to clean up your park, we want you to not sell these things, we want you to do these things that are not currently in code. But we can't tell you. So that makes sense. So like Mr. Warden, I want to think about it some. What are the current issues? That is, are they currently having dining inside the mobile food unit? Are they currently putting a sign up that violates this?
I think staff is here and the applicant are here, and they could answer those questions.
I want a succinct list of what they are in violation of outside of the alcohol.
Mm-hmm. Francis, do you have that list, or is there someone else here who could?
Well, so the site was inspected by a fire plan review this morning, and so I can pass that to you. I just got this morning. The fire department. So the fire department went out there and made a list of, these are the issues that we saw this morning when we inspected it. And what the fire department says on the last one is they removed the chairs from the inside. So there's no chairs inside the mobile food unit. But you're not allowed to have public occupancy inside the mobile food unit. If you look at the mobile food unit rules, Title 23, it just says that mobile food units only allowed to be occupied by the people that work inside of it. The public's not allowed.
Okay, so there was occupancy inside the food unit. That's 8. 9 is, were they serving alcohol without food?
That's what we're hearing.
So that's 9. 10, where is there?
I would say I went there yesterday and I asked if I stood out on the deck because they were preparing to serve people, and I said, "Can I buy a beer without food?" And they said yes. So,
I would say there is a caveat. When we discussed how 9 should be interpreted, and I would defer to those of you who were potentially there when this was adopted, there are 2 different readings of this language, and this is the language from the original AR. This could be read to say, my initial read of it was, you can't sell alcohol in a time when you're not serving food. So you can't say, well, we stopped serving food at 6, but from 6 to 11 we're serving only beer. Was how I read this initially, but there's a different reading, which is you can't sell, anyone who comes and buys a taco has to also buy a beer, or buys a beer has to also buy a taco. So, and I don't know what you intended, to be frank. So I think that there's another point here in 9, you may want to, if you do want to continue to have this requirement, you may want to clarify this, what your intent is if you're trying to.
So let me get that list. Well, go ahead.
I just wanted to say on that, it's interesting. It's an interesting point. When I read that just now, my interpretation was the former, that they had to serve them at the same time. I've never heard of a place being required to you have to buy 2 food items, to buy 2 items at the same time. But none of us were on the body except I believe Mr. Trainee and Mr. Peterson. So perhaps maybe we'll get a little bit more in depth in that later if Mr. Croft wants to finish his line of
just
questioning.
really quickly. So 10, there is currently signage that's advertises beer and wine?
Yeah, and there's multiple banner signs.
And 11, are we connected or not connected or have been connected to water and sewer?
They're connected.
And are there other violations after that? Hold on just 1 second, I'm almost done. 12, 13. Well, 12 is a violation. There are now notice of permits violations outstanding and need to be resolved. And the connexes are there, not there?
Yeah, there's 5 connexes there now. At the time the assembly was looking at it, I think there was just the one.
5 connexes, and then 14
Say 1,
is
2, 3, 4, 5. There's 5.
the banner signs don't currently comply with, so is that different from the 10 sign that has beer and wine? They also don't comply for other reasons? 14 says a banner sign violation of some kind or that you have to comply. Are they in violation of that now, 2147?
So it's kind of confusing, the language in the original approval, but it says, I think it says that the banner sign has to comply with other banner signs. That was in the original approval, and so it's not. And then the second thing is that it says with the exception of a banner sign, that's the only advertising of alcohol that you can have. And they've got multiple signs advertising alcohol. But then, Becky and I were talking, and it may have been the intent of the assembly is not to prohibit the advertising alcohol, just not to make it look like you could do drive-through alcohol. It's hard to say. So the original approval, some of the language is confusing.
Well, but this language does come directly from the original approval,
Yeah,
and it does seem
yeah.
to be your concern. There was a direct concern in 2015 about not giving the impression that the business is serving drive-through.
Because it's a drive-through.
Alcohol.
Sure. Okay, so even putting the 2 banner rules together, there are 6 areas of violation outlined here that we know about now. I counted. They have been serving food inside, or public occupancy inside the unit. There's this confusion about the alcohol, but they will provide alcohol standing around. There's a banner deck that advertises alcohol. They're connected to water and sewer. There's a violation of their notice of permit. And they have 5 connexes on the site.
So, thank you, Mr. Croft. So, Mr. Gates wanted to speak, and then we have a variety of people in the queue. Sorry, Mr. Tran.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I wanted to just mention something about number 11, the connection of waterways were in your packets and attached. It's the 2015 resolution, and it mentions something I think we should be aware of. So it's page 388 of your packet. It's attached. And it's the 2015-261 resolution. Section 5 is all about the Assembly being made aware of a possible quick connect disconnect option for on-site water and sewer for a mobile food unit, but it was anticipating a possible code amendment at that time. If you read that section 5 from that 2015 resolution, that did not happen. They were expecting possibly an amendment within 6 months or so. That never happened. Nothing's changed. So, as relevant to why we had this water sewer document and as to which we do not now, I think that's important. I guess one of the things that Mr. Croft mentioned, a summary of the violations. The planning department staff analysis is basically the summary of violations, but it's 8 pages. So maybe we'll do all 1 page listing. However, everything is listed there in staff analysis. I would note, though, that in the packet, distributed with your meeting binders, the staff analysis is missing the last page for some reason, but I understand you have a revised analysis. So that included the staff's recommendation on that last page.
Thank you, Mr. Gates. Mr. Train.
Francis, how did they hook up to the water and sewer if you're not allowed to do it?
I think
Who
when
gave
I
the permission?
Well, I think that the operator connected by what I've heard him explain, a quick connect. You know, they would be able to explain it better. They, I guess we don't have anyone from AWU here. I think the argument they would make is, what I've heard AWU tell me is that when you connect to public water and sewer to prevent the intrusion into our water system, you're supposed to hard connect and get it permitted and stuff. And they don't have that. They have some sort of removable connection that they can connect when they want to, pull it off at night or something like that.
So let me know, do they owe any current fines or fees?
There was the property taxes one that was noted by Treasury. So we've got comments from different municipal agencies in the packet, and Treasury said that they had delinquent property taxes. The building official, Ross Knopfsinger, said that there was a $4,000 NOPR or building permit violation fine thing out there, and then they'd been in violation with DHHS a number of times.
You want pages on in your back?
Yeah, we can go with that for sure. I tried not to do an information dump of too much, but let's see.
The agency and public comment section starts at what I think is page 13 of the document that you have in front of you. You have the
That's what I think, then I'll find it. Thank you.
Not page 13, I think. It's kind of right in the middle of your OR.
It's tough because we're dealing with different.
Decision
Oh,
on
they
appeal.
renumbered it. Just 1 second. Let me grab the renumbered copy.
17.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I know.
All right.
317, 319.
Oh, behind my staff report, it's missing a whole. It's missing all the supporting documentation. Oh well, let me see. There should be a divider that says municipal and public, departmental and public comments, and behind that divider is all the attached comments from public reviewing agencies like DHHS, Treasury, and in this packet that I found on the table here. Oh, okay, let's see here. No, that's all Mr. Coffey's.
No, Francis, you looking at this?
Well, on the table here next to me, I just grabbed one of these, right? And I have in the file my packet that I submitted into the PACE system that has the order and everything, but
I think it starts on page 314. So all the attachments.
Yeah. I think the challenge is we're looking at 3 different versions. We're looking at the version that's in your,
On the table, there's lots of municipal staff comments, reports after page, looks like 120.
120.
It looks like right around there, 121, 122. The right-of-way permit application.
No, that's all part of Mr. Coffey's thing. Mr. Coffey's application in defense of the request for extension of the. It's not in this.
yeah, I don't think it's in the packet that's on your table. I think it's in the packet you received in your binder. There's additional pieces that are in
And
the
I've got it
binder.
right here. It's just
Yeah.
we got comments from like 5 agencies. You know, private development, fire, treasury, DHHS, development services, the building official. It's like 5 agencies.
Any idea how much money we're talking about?
Yeah, they stated how much it was.
Shouldn't tell you
No, this just should be right at my fingertips. Okay. So I have these comments in my version of the packet, and that's fire, development services, treasury, $986.41 from 2017 business, personal, property taxes. $986.41.
All right.
okay, and this fire inspection was done today?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Trainee. Mr. Actually, let me see. I lost my. Chris and then John. Mr. Constant.
So a few things. On the topic of item number 9, sale of alcoholic beverages and food, there's no place in town that I know of that I've ever been to where you must buy a beer if you buy food.
That's my food.
Right. Or, yeah, there's no place in the community where you must buy food if you buy food. If they sell beer, then you can buy beer even if they sell food. And so that seems to me a pretty weird reading of this. It would be unusual, it would be rare, and maybe the only one of its kind in which we require you buy food with beer. So it seems to me that's not a fair standard. Second, these monetary issues, the violations that are to be corrected, et cetera, it seems to me that those are they not just things that we in a standard conditional use when someone comes up for review require that they do and delegate authority to the clerk's office to ensure that those things are met before the document is approved?
Yes, I think they're fairly standard items that you
So,
want to have wrapped up.
In your section of items that are unusual, it's really kind of boilerplate.
Well, it's in there because it was a request of the applicant that this body take action to resolve those outstanding fines. And so this is addressing that request and saying, no, you got to resolve them with the right entities.
Right.
Go to the tax assessor with your tax issue.
Right.
Go to the building official with your building official issue.
Right.
Yeah.
And so in some ways, those things are just generally what we do with any licensee who comes forward with a request.
Yes.
Okay, and
Also, these were conditions of approval, many of them at the time that they were approved 2 years ago.
2 years ago.
Yeah.
No, I understand that, and there is a whole conversation to be had on that topic. But it's important that we keep in perspective that a good number of these things are pretty standard.
Yeah, these were really drafted to be basically sort of the bare minimum. You're saying there are certain things we can't grant you because the code won't let us, so fix them the way you're supposed to under the code, otherwise fine, you can have a conditional use permit. So again, you can certainly add more things to these. You are open authority to add whatever you want to this. This is sort of my most basic list.
Right, and so I just want to put it all in perspective, like, unlike what my friend over here, Mr. Croft, is saying, it's not that these are necessarily signs of clear violation, open and ongoing and notorious things, that they're things that we're demanding must be corrected in order for this to go forward if the body approves. And that's pretty standard. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Constant. Mr. Weddleton.
Okay. Well, that's all good information. I appreciate that. So, and gets back up to 11 and just a general thought. It seems like if you have a food establishment being hooked up to public water and sewer, it's going to be better than having a water hole leaking and so on. So you're really something that's probably more healthy and sanitary.
Well, I think the challenge is that if you think that, you should amend the code. Because the challenge is you really don't get to, we run into an equal protection issue if you sort of are like, okay, fine, you don't have to, but you have to. You really need to, the appropriate route is to introduce a change to Title 23 and change Title 16 and to make that change. And this is drafted to say as soon as this body, if this body elects to make that change, then these folks can hook up to water and sewer. But right now the code is very clear.
But the original 2015 anticipated that code change, so we said we'll give you a little bit of time, but we never did it. Is that correct?
Yeah, it more or less had this same provision. It said it's not permitted under current code, but if the code changes, you'll get to do it. And so they, I think that the hookup was made at the time, and the body said, "Oh yeah, well we're going to make that change," and then it didn't happen. So if you'd like to make the change, you certainly can. AO is the appropriate avenue to do that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Weldon. So Mr. Constant wanted back in the queue, but then after that, I'd like, unless there's more you need to hit, I'd like to hear from the applicant a little bit.
Yeah, and actually that was really my next question. It would be nice to hear the report from both parties in their concise ways. But I agree that in some ways the minute you drop the ball, it doesn't really excuse why someone would just go ahead and do it anyways. But it certainly begs it for a solution. So, and I would like to hear the report.
Okay. Anything more from you guys before we go to? Okay. Mr. Coffey, if you want to, you have someone to speak as well.
No, Adam, let me have Tom come up first.
Come sit down and let's hear.
Mr. Chairman, members of the Assembly, this is Tom Falkenberry. He's been working on the permit issues with Ron Thompson. So he's here to answer questions and so on. I'm going to start this. I saw the planning staff analysis about 10 o'clock today. Becky was kind enough to send it to me as well as the S version on the resolution for Tuesday night. And what I did was I took the book we submitted to you sometime in May, I forget the date, and cross-checked against every one of the items on there. And when I got done doing that, what I found was that basically there are answers to every single allegation of non-compliance in this book by number, and there we have 31 tabs, 2 of which are absent, but they're going to be supplemented now because we finally got the material. And basically, if you read them, you can, there's a couple that need to be changed. For example, there is no filing of the notice of zoning, or the resolution that you file with once you get approval. Generally, those come to us from the staff. We then do the recording. But since we didn't give them notice that we had complied with everyone, they never sent that recording instrument. Well, now I know that you have to go tell them you've done it, and they send it to you. Francis was kind enough to tell me that. But those are relatively minor things. And I'm going to put this in writing to you, and I'm going to try my best to get it done this afternoon if I can. But there's a substantial amount of work that needs to be done to get that answer to you. But I'm going to do everything I can to get it done so that you, I'm sitting here with you folks having the opportunity to read what they say and nothing from us. And we have answers to virtually all of these matters and places you can go to confirm what we're going to be telling you. So with that in mind, I'd like for Tom to be able to tell you quickly what they're doing to get the the building permit issues resolved and those fines as well. He knows about that. I don't. Go ahead.
So my name is Thomas Falkenberry with Falkenberry Associates. We're taking a look at, as Dan said, about converting the buildings to permanent structures. We've had several conversations with Ross Nossinger and Wayne Boland, who's a MOA structural reviewer, about the process to take and make Connex a permanent structure. So we're in the process of analyzing that and putting together drawings. We're taking a look at the site to see how we can make this all comply as a permanent facility. We're going to be exploring those options and putting together the drawings. We've just started taking a look at it, analyzing everything, so we're hoping within the next few weeks to be able to have everything put together to be able to turn in for a permit.
Okay, thank you. So I have a question for Mr. Weldon, but before I do that, I'd like to, from you, Mr. Coffey, so for your client, we've got 4 options to choose here. Can you rank them in terms of your preference?
Number 3 would end this matter now, except we have to continue to do the things that are required under the original resolution, some of which probably ought to be amended. Number 1 and 2 are, obviously we don't want either one of those to happen. And number 4, it's kind of a toss-up between 3 and 4. 4 makes some of those changes that are appropriate and necessary, and 3 leaves it exactly as it is now, which means there's some things that probably need to be changed that that we've learned over the last 2 years, which would be beneficial both to the applicant and as well as to the municipality. So to answer that question, not 1, not 2, 3 or 4, and it's not easy to make a call between the 2 of them because both of them have multiple conditions associated with them, some of which should be changed. It could be a combination of those where we take, I intend to address every one of the conditions in a writing that I'm going to try to get you today that addresses every one of them, and where I come to one that doesn't make a lot of sense, I will say, so this one should be deleted from, and either 3 or 4 get you to a position where you're able to, well, 3 doesn't, 4 gets you to the place where you can make amendments, or you could change number 3 a little bit and say subject to further amendment. Either way would make this thing fit better with what's going on out there.
Thank you. Mr. Weddleton, you have a question? Mr. Cross?
Sort of. You know, I'm trying to think how long we've been looking at this. It's been a couple months, hasn't it?
Yeah.
And am I right? But I mean,
Yeah, you're right, but we looked at it for 18 months back in 2014, 1914.
But it's come back to us, so this is my first.
Yes, I know. It was a lengthy, convoluted, and technically difficult situation because it was brand new. Now we have a lot more experience, and it's not brand new, and there are others who are using connexes in not the identical fashion, but in similar fashion. You can now get a building permit for a connex, which was unheard of 3 years ago, 4 years ago.
Okay, but a few months ago we looked at, because I look at this and I can't remember exactly, but none of this looked particularly new compared to what we were looking at when it was introduced, right? So.
Are you talking about the license renewal?
Looking at
Just in general, this AO or AR, the different points. On
no, these points are substantially the same as what they were back then.
Yeah.
So can you go through 1, 2 through 15 of them real quick and say, I mean, you did with number 1, and number 2. I mean, tell us what
number
you are.
1.
Is this
Number
you
2,
disconnect
the
the
use.
water and survive?
Well, we're getting the building permit for number 2, so I'll go through that.
I can address it.
Hmm?
I can address it.
Okay, then I don't care who does it, just so John gets an answer.
Well, I think, I don't know, is that okay with the chair?
Yeah, that's fine. Why don't you swap out with this gentleman here?
Okay, the first
Here we go.
I feel like I'm in the principal's office.
So identify yourself for the record, please.
You've been there before, Ed.
Chair, some members, thank you for taking time today. So I think that
So I'm sorry, you are.
Adam Longfield, sorry.
Okay, great.
I own AK Alchemist. So I think I want to address the violations first. So in 2016, when we got our initial liquor license permit, we got it on June 7th. On June 17th, the municipality came out, wrote violations 10 days after we got our liquor license. And therefore, what it did is it held up all permits for that property where you couldn't get any more permits. So they put the property on hold. Subsequently, then I couldn't get any permits to, create the bar, treat the deck, and what they referenced in that was, building permit for moving the connex on site. They said was a permit or a violation. They said hooking to gas, which we're not hooked to gas, is a violation. The building the deck was a violation. Therefore, and they handcuffed me, so I couldn't get any permits. So that's why you have these violations in here. And I think Mr. Pearson can attest. We were doing daily inspections for a couple months.
I was asked by the active building official to come by twice a week.
So that's that. As far as the sewer and water goes, We did connect in 2015. The assembly came out with AG10, which says, you know, the mobile food units can be hooked up into sewer and water. And then, so what we did is we hooked up into it. We went through AWU. We got everything permitted. Through AWU. They came out. They did all the tests and everything. We put in a 6-inch line, so not your typical 3/4. So 6 inch for a future building. You know, we had to get a big permit and, you know, road closures and everything. So we only want to do that one time. So that's how we got the sewer and water. We are currently connected to sewer and water.
I thought you were going to go in order, and so you're on the sewer and water, which is 11 on this, and that's all right.
Oh, yeah, I'll go in order. Yeah.
No, so on the sewer, so can I step in? What ordinance made that a legal action?
AG10.
So, if, Mr. Chair,
Yeah,
let me
go
to
ahead.
address that. So that's actually a policy issued by, so the building official, issues policies which interpret code. And my understanding is that was a policy in 2015. It is currently not the policy of the building department. It's been rescinded, I think, in place of the code, the provisions of Title 23 that make explicit that connection to sewer and water is not permitted. I didn't have time today to understand from the building official exactly what happened, if that was policy was issued and it was rescinded when the code was adopted, but either way, the policy is no longer in effect, and the code very clearly states that it is not permitted.
When
And
did you
there's-
attach?
2015.
So, are there grandfather rights? And if you install something like that under a policy where it was legal and then it's removed, rescinded?
It's a good question. We can try and figure it out. It says, the policy states, and again, I couldn't find, the only copy that we have came from the applicant because the policy is not currently in any kind of current building official document. It states may be connected subject to meeting code requirements and filing for and receiving all applicable permits. All utility work must be accomplished by MOA certified contractors. So we'd certainly track down whether that requirement was met, in fact, all elements of that requirement, and then when this shifted with respect to the code.
What month of 15 did you connect?
I've got the information right here. So this went through AWU, and I've got the actual inspection here that they did and the approval, and it is dated, date of application 8/6/2012, but the actual line was installed. This is dated 2012, but it's approximately middle of summer 2015.
So, before going any further, Dean was in the, did you have something along what he was saying?
I just wanted to ask for clarification at the times the plans to make this a permanent structure. So can we understand that then? I think we said in the next few months that it's permanent structure. Do you mean obtaining a building permit no longer be a mobile food unit?
It's not a permanent structure, it's a mobile food unit.
And is that going to change?
It's just stating that.
Will that change? I think it's.
Well, that's what we're in the process of dealing with the architects and the engineers on.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's what I'm asking. So in the process and in the future, we're going to change the plan to change that.
I'm real bad at predictions, but we've hired 2 very good and knowledgeable engineers and architects to give us that advice. They've been on board about 3 or 4 weeks, and they've done a lot of initial work.
Okay. Let's see. I had, Francis, and then I think I had Pete in the queue. Yeah, we got a little bit off track, but yeah, Francis, go ahead, and then we got Pete in the queue, and then Chris.
So I know you guys don't have this in front of you, but page 15 of the packet that I prepared has comments from the health department. Representatives of the health department are sitting in the audience, and it's a memo from them saying that they issued notices of violation for connection to the water and sewer, and that if it remains to be connected, it's still connected. So per Title 16.60, they're saying it's not allowed in a mobile food unit. They're connected and it's not allowed. It's just a whole memo describing this situation. And then
Dated when?
well, they wrote this memo May 30 is when they
This year.
this year, yeah, just last month. And then there's an explanation from the building official in development services comments saying that you can't connect to water and sewer. There's a paragraph that he wrote. Title 23 doesn't allow it or whatever.
Where's that?
It's in the component, there's one component of the packet that didn't make it into who's in front of you. It's in your actual packet that you've received. There were a few pages attached to Francis's original report, which when he submitted the amended report, were not attached. So they're in your assembly. It should be in your assembly packet for Tuesday's meeting, but they're not in this amended version.
Okay.
I would say we can certainly track down a bit more where the pieces fell along historically. It looks to me like, looking at the 2015 decision, that at that point the Assembly was made aware that there was potentially this connection and stated it's not permitted under the code, disconnect until the code is amended. But we can certainly track down. I mean, their staff could certainly track down more detail. I could certainly opine on whether or not there's a grandfathering issue.
Thank you, Mr. Pearson. Do you have a follow-up to that, Mr. Peterson?
Yeah.
Do you want to follow up on that? Do you have more questions you want to ask?
Yes.
Go ahead.
All right, thank you. Well, there was a fairly long discussion about this. And it's located in the east part of downtown, which needs additional development. So we decided that we would allow this as sort of an experiment, see if it would actually work. Because no one had ever had a permanent mobile food unit before. And at that particular time when we approved it, there was one Connex there. But we were hoping that if this was reasonably successful, that they would build a permanent structure there. But we did not envision that the permanent structure would be 5 connected Connexes. We were hoping that they would have a permanent building built so that it would be sort of a traditional establishment. And so if that is the plan, then maybe we're partway there.
Well, if I could correct it, there were 3 Connexes on site. The mobile food unit itself was originally a Connex. There was a Connex spot that was on your diagram that you approved back in 15 or 16. Whenever the approval was made, you have a diagram in front of you that shows the Connex where they would be serving to the deck. And then there was another Connex on the adjacent lot, those 2 lots there, that was just there. And there were 2 Connexes brought in after the place opened. And the justification for that is that a contractor can put Connexes on his property for storage and other purposes. And that too is in the blue book. And frankly, I would really urge you guys to take a look at this. This is our case. And I see there's a foot of paperwork around here from the city, but
No, that's actually the last, about half of most of the foot of paperwork in front of everyone is that. It's just not in a blue, it's not in a blue book anymore.
This is organized. And our brief, which will follow hopefully this afternoon, will tie back to that. So that's a lot of information we put together for you. I'm not sure it's that.
Yeah, it is. It starts on page, it's actually the whole section 3 that says application is all of their materials. So if you're looking at the packet that was in front of you, not your assembly packet, but the packet that was in front of you when you walked in, it's in both. It's in both the assembly packet and in the packet right in front of you. Just one second.
Does it have the index there?
It doesn't have tabs in it anymore, but it has copies of every single page. I'm sorry, I'm just pulling it out.
Yeah, it doesn't. We have cross references.
It starts on page 29 of the document that's in front of you that you got as a handout today. In your packet, I actually have your packet in front of you. Maybe Mr. Gates may. He could tell you what page it is. It's assembly packet version.
Page 29, for what I just sort of grabbed next to me.
Yeah, but what is it in the packet?
Yeah, that's what we're looking for.
Well, we got it here, so that helps.
Yep, you have multiple times. You have
Mr. Chairman?
It starts on page 352 of your packet, 352 of your assembly packet. page 29 of what was the handout today. All of the rest of that is application materials submitted by the applicant.
Mr. Coffey?
What I will do today, and I'll get it done as soon as we're done here, is just go through what the staff said about all of the 13 conditions and give you the tab numbers so you can look it all up in your blue books and see where we come to the conclusion that there isn't complete compliance. There is very substantial compliance. And I did two other things. We called the owner of the land, and he said he went and paid the taxes and he had the receipt, and we asked him to get it to us. We called him about 11 o'clock, and we haven't got it yet. That was the one thing. What was the other thing that we dug up today or something? Yeah, we've been busy since morning.
So, go ahead.
Just one minor point for the applicant. If you want to reference by the page, the pagination that's in the assembly packet, it's available online on the agenda page. You
No,
can
I'm
go to-
taking the thing with me.
Well, yeah, but the pagination that's here isn't the pagination in the actual assembly packet. This is the additional, this is just a reference packet for today's work session. So I
But
would
it's
use.
still, it
if
carries
you
over
want-
the numbers,
yeah.
so if you refer to your 0 to 150, you'll be able to track that.
Okay.
But what you don't have is the index, which tells you where you can go find something.
I don't know what you're talking about. Oh,
It just says if you want to read about this topic or that topic, there it is.
okay. You're right. I don't think that made it into the packet.
Because it was a tab, I don't know if it's in the packet or not.
Okay.
But I'll include that.
Thank you, Mr. Coffey. We have Chris in the queue, but before that, I wanted to ask a question. This is sort of a big picture question. I intend to run this a little bit long, so we've still got a lot of questions here. So I had asked the applicant what their sort of preferred outcome was of those 4 boxes. And I know Ms. Wynn Pearson, you, and I believe Mr. Gates too, have been working with the applicant on this. So I don't know if the administration is capable of speaking with one voice on this, because there are a bunch of different sort of departments that are at issue here. But from the administration's perspective, what is your preferred outcome of these 4 boxes?
I think when you ask about what the administration is seeking, you should really ask what planning or what staff would think. My goal, what Mr. Gates and I have been doing, is acting as your counsel in trying to put before you the various options and the various legal paths that you can take and the parameters of what you can and can't do here. In terms of whether or not the staff within the executive branch believe that this should go forward, that's not something that we could comment on. That's something that Mr. McLaughlin or others from planning and from building safety and fire and et cetera could comment on.
So I guess Francis, well, I mean, that's what I'm worried about. So we'll have 5 different agencies saying different things. I want a voice of administration to say what your preference is. I don't know if that is something you're comfortable doing, Mr. McLaughlin.
Well, the planning department staff report sort of acknowledges the history that planning department denied Mr. Blomfield, AK Alchemist requests for a it was called an alcohol restaurant eating place site plan review in that structure, mobile food unit, whatever. We denied that because we felt that the zoning code said that it had to be in a permanent structure. The applicant appealed to the assembly, and the assembly approved it and decided on appeal, and set some parameters, some time limits and that. And the planning department makes no change about its recommendation. We just have sort of gone through the conditions of approval that were placed on them and asked from the reviewing agencies, are they in compliance with this or not? And that's, those are those 5 agencies that commented and said these are the violations, or these are how they're not in compliance, or how they are, because they are in compliance with many of these. So the recommendation is for denial of this alcohol conditional use, but that's the same as it was back then. But the assembly acted to approve it back then.
Thank you, Francis.
And
So go ahead, Mr. Constantine.
Yeah, so, the options that are on the substitute version, there's another option that I want. And it's the option, and the petitioner, I don't like the sound of this, that sets another expiration date of a conditional use permit that extends into the future this question, and that allows one more shot at the apple to prove that you're willing and able to comply with the rules. And the reason I make that argument is because, again, I see a business that's helpful to the neighborhood, that's busy and engaging for people. I've been by every night because I drive by it to go home, and there are dozens of people associating there. And yet still, you have challenges that you seem unable to comply with, some that should be complied with and some that maybe aren't possible. And so what I would seek, separate from what's in the S version at this time, is the number 2 box with a statement that shall provide or shall comply with applicable provisions of the new conditions listed. And that we remove conditions that are patently unachievable because of kind of bureaucratic snafus that we all recognize have been there, and that we extend the conditions that we recognize are needed, like meet your building permits, pay your fees, do all of those things that are required, and then we will ask the question one last time, is this a conditional use worth extending? Some would say should have done that in the first place, and that's a conversation I imagine we'll have. But I would seek a 3rd or a 5th option in there that's a blend between item number 2 and item number 4.
We can certainly draft a floor amendment for you that would add that you could consider on Tuesday night. And I would say one process point to Mr. Dunbar's question. On Tuesday night, the process for the public hearing, the applicant will have 10 minutes, and the staff, Mr. McLaughlin, will deliver a staff report, which is the summary of the planning staff's recommendation, which it will be given after having gathered comments from other reviewing agencies. I think that is actually what will give your voice, single voice from the administration of what.
And I actually we have tickets in the queue, but I also wanted to ask, how do we actually check one of these boxes, logistically in process, maybe Mr. Gates can answer that, like at the assembly meeting, do we amend it in such a way where this is what's...
I can speak to that. We talked about what we envision you doing is moving the AR and then moving an amendment to the AR to check a box, voting on the amendment, voting on the AR.
Okay, Mr. Trainee.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. The fire inspection was done in May and then rechecked in June of 17. Are you going to comply with the fire inspection? Make the corrections, or haven't you seen it?
I have to these guys one. So I usually look at there's a trip hazard with a data cable. There's an extension cord that was cut off. There's a renewal on the fire extinguisher. This is really minor stuff, absolutely. And at the very beginning of 2016, we had a full litany of stuff that we did for the fire inspector that was all complete. So it's just a few new items that are very
So take care of all this?
absolutely.
By Tuesday?
Yeah.
Well, there are 10 of them. Now, some of them are minor, but some seem in the medium category.
Like what?
The extinguishers have expired, the lift system's not tagged, we're storing things on top of the water heater that are combustible. Those seem, and a cut extension cord used as a proven thing with wires exposed seems up from small to medium.
So, sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, no, go ahead, that was basically that, yeah.
So the municipality wrote me a violation in 2015 about the extension cord. They told me to cut it off, so we cut it off. And then we ran power to the connexes, which was approved. And Ms. Wilson, to answer your question, yes, I worked very closely with Julie with a couple different items, but the water is way more sanitary. I think she can attest to that. The sewer water is more sanitary than not. And we did lose. We get 99 and 100% on our health inspections. We did lose 1 point because we were hooked up to a more sanitary health. Because we were hooked up to the sewer water, we actually lost
1 point?
1 point,
That's
yeah.
how much
So
that violation is.
So we're going above and beyond. We hooked this sewer water, but then we got penalized for it. We got 99% on our section 10 requirement. No liquor license violations.
Mr. Chair, more than no liquor license violations, I have neighbors shouting and screaming about bars in every direction. The operation is good. It's just a question of safety and compliance that we're
Okay,
But
that's
safety-
just a little asterisk.
I'm not
Needed
saying
safety and
that's a bigger
compliance.
That's not what I'm
violation.
saying. What I'm saying is it's not the operation.
Well, they haven't had marijuana violations either. I mean, they haven't had, there are a bunch of things they didn't do that were illegal. I could go through the code and say, here are crimes they have not committed. But they are a list of violations of significant health and safety issues that have gone on for a long, long time.
1 point on a
No,
95-point scale.
That's, yeah. They haven't committed any felonies.
Mr. Trainee, were you done with your line of questioning?
Oh, He's fine. I'm done.
Okay. Mr. Weddleton?
Just some clarification, I think, do you own the property? There's two properties in.
Yeah, I own them, and then I sold them last year to a colleague of mine.
So you did own them, now you don't own them?
Yeah, I owned them in 2012. I bought them, and then this has been an ongoing process.
So if that's the case, so if he doesn't own the property, but the property owner owes taxes, which apparently is taken care of, but.
He was who we contacted.
Okay, but, so he would have to shut down because the property owner didn't pay property taxes?
I don't think anyone's saying shut down anything.
Oh,
Saying
that was a
pay the
violation.
taxes, yeah.
I that was one of the conditions.
So the way we process cases is that Mr. Blomfield and his representative made application for extension and permanency of the alcohol conditional use and removal of some of the conditions of approval, and their defense that the conditions had been met. And so we sent that application out to like 8 different reviewing agencies and asked for their comments to come back. And then the planning department becomes a clearinghouse to package all those, write a staff analysis, and then send it to the commission. And so we've just got those, 5 or 6 agencies that commented. And one of them is Treasury. It said that it was delinquent property taxes. And you're familiar with that from the whole marijuana gig.
That's not really relevant for his
Although,
case, though, the property tax.
Well, you can't receive an alcohol. You can't receive an alcohol license. You see that separately. There's the many of these things are attached to the alcohol license renewal. And even though he's the owner of AK Alchemist and somebody else owns the property that he sits on, the alcohol license couldn't be renewed until property taxes are paid, right?
So,
Yeah,
Even
I
if
think-
he's not. the
so
owner.
hold on, okay, let's get back on track here. So Ms. Lynn Pearson and then Mr. Gates.
I think legally the answer to your question is yes, he is in some way. We don't grant extraordinary land use entitlements if there's an underlying land issue, and his recourse would be through his lease, presumably, to his landlord, who presumably is on the hook to pay the taxes, hasn't paid the taxes. So if he hasn't paid the taxes, then he's got to go to his landlord and say, pay the taxes. You committed that you would under my lease document. I can't get my conditional use permit because you're being a bum. And then we end up resolving the issue.
Mr. Gates, do you have something to add to that?
If I remember correctly, that statement from Treasury was about business personal property taxes, not real property taxes. So I think that might be a distinction there. And then I also want to mention, as Mr. McLaughlin said, we've got a liquor license renewal protest that's pending until we resolve all of this. Part of that condition to resolve for the liquor license renewal protest is to pay the taxes. So this conditional use permit approval, we have that condition here as well. So it's in both places. The taxes just need to be paid.
Thank you, Mr. Gates. This gentleman in the back wanted to say something. Can you identify yourself for the record?
Bill Peterson, Building Safety Code Abatement Officer.
Could you come a little closer so you could get picked up by this?
Sure. So, back a ways, but we'll clarify. So, grandfather rights relating to permits. If it was built under a permit and approved and done correctly, you're locked into that. You don't have to update and say change it. If you do something without a permit, and then you want to get it permitted later, you don't have grandfather rights. The current code applies.
So, but in this case, my understanding was they did in the case of AWU, right, in the water, they were permitted in that like brief moment in time in 2015. It sounds like we had a policy that allowed them to do that.
So AWU maybe gave them a permit. Building department did not.
Is that
It was
right?
not obtained.
Correct, yes. So AWU did give us a permit. They approved it. For AK Alchemist, we got a permit and approval that went through the municipality where people could go inside and walk in there and sit and eat. And this all went through the permitting process in 2013. I've got a certificate of occupancy dated December 31st, 2013. And then, so things this has all been through and approved for the permits. The reason we didn't get permits is because what the building department did is they issued us a violation that was incorrect for natural gas, so we're not hooked to natural gas. They issued this frivolous violation, right? You can't move a connex on your property, that's a violation. And so what it did is it put the property on hold. And so no permits were being able to be issued for that property. And I think I've got an email from you, Mr. Peterson, dated June, that, okay, we took all your permits and properties off a hold, so now you can apply for your permits, and therefore start applying for permits. by that time, I couldn't wait 2 years until the building department decided they would take my property off a hold. So what we continue to do, everything's exposed, we just did it. I said, okay, you can look at it, we can inspect it, and it's here. Let's now we can go back and revisit it. So nothing got covered up, and it's basically.
But it still probably means you don't have grandfather rights if they haven't issued, if the building people did not issue you a permit, and they're just going to do it now, then it sounds like you don't have grandfather rights. But that doesn't mean that's not dispositive. It's just one point among many. Mr. Peterson and Mr. Weddleton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I know we're running over originally planned time, but I'd actually like to hear from the architects and the engineers about what the long-term plans are for this area, what a permanent building might look like.
Are they here, Mr. Coffey? Do you have any of your engineers?
Well, they're here, but I'm not sure they know what the long-term plans are. One of the things that we're submitting tonight, or this process, is a report on why today, and who knows how long, and it's based on an ICER report from April about the situation in the economy, as if we need any proof of it. And basically that letter will say to you that the economy is still in decline, but the rate of decline has decreased significantly from what it was when it was $22 a barrel oil. So you want to know why a permanent office building is not built there, it doesn't pencil. Which is, of course, shouldn't be a surprise to anybody.
Yes.
So something I want to address too is the notice of permit requirement violations that you're saying that the third one was an issue to Mr. Longfield.
I didn't hear you.
So there's 4 notice of permits requirements that have been issued to Mr.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Violations. The third one, you're stating that he didn't receive it, wasn't issued correctly or something.
Oh,
like
is
that.
the unsigned one that
Yeah,
was
the unsigned.
supposedly posted somewhere on the property?
The one that's unable to reach owner.
Yeah, that's the one. That's in our book too, by the way.
Responded for Ross, since he's not here. So Ross and Mr. Barnhill were both on the site Friday and issued it to one of his employees.
This Friday?
No,
Well,
he's
that
not.
Friday,
He's
that
explaining.
Back what happened. So yeah, backwards. So it was given to an employee, which is not allowed by code. We just have to post it on the site. Monday morning, per Adam, we have a meeting with him there and a bunch of other people from code and safety to discuss it. So then the notice of permit requirement was discussed and he knows about it.
Okay.
It wasn't a mystery.
Okay, so this is, we're over time here. I'm going to go to Mr. Weddleton and then Mr. Gates, and then we're going to have to end.
Can I make one comment before you adjourn? At the very end.
Okay.
Just on process.
Mr. Weddleton?
Okay, getting back to my rule for the property, so it sounded like, so you don't own the property, so the current property owner moved 2 complexes on the property?
No, I didn't.
Oh, you did, okay.
Yeah.
Mr. Gates and Mr. Pearson.
Yes, what Mr. Peterson was speaking of is detailed in the Development Services comments, page 317 of your packet, about performances about the component requirements.
Okay. Thank you. Ms. Pearson?
So just a couple quick process points. The first being the only pages that you really should take from today's packet in front of you to replace your binder are just the S version and the staff report. Those are really the only changes. Everything else is already in your, and that additional fire inspection that Mr. McLaughlin passed out. The rest of the stuff here is a duplicate of what's in your assembly binder. You can disregard, and that includes everything that Mr. Coffey submitted. And everything that Mr. Coffey submitted was circulated to staff. That was considered the application for this. It went through all the municipal departments. So it has been there. It's in your binder for you all to review. Just a few quick reminders that this is a quasi-judicial proceeding, that your decision on Tuesday should be based on matters you've heard here, matters that are in the record, not on independent visits to the taco stand this weekend or any other kind of conversations you may have had outside of this process. And another reminder that the hearing on Tuesday has 2 purposes. It's both the review of the request for modification and extension of the conditional use permit. It's also assembly-initiated review, which is required by the existing conditional use permit prior to any extension of the applicant's progress toward a long-term construction of a permanent facility on the site. That was a required condition of the original AR before any extension. So it has kind of this dual-fold purpose on Tuesday night. And I will elaborate on process again Tuesday night before we dive into the public hearing.
Okay.
That was one of the criteria in the original approval, is to gauge the progress towards permanent structure of the building.
Okay, well, I think what,
Question, Becky, you didn't mention the original AR as something I need to carry forward, but you laid it on the table because there was a problem with the one that was in the packet.
Yep, you can, yes, you should replace the one in your packet with that as well, although the document that will be before you is the S version which went on the addendum. If you would like additional floor amendments pre-drafted, certainly let Gates or I know, and we can make sure we have as much of this done on Tuesday as possible to potentially avoid a special meeting.
okay, well, lots more to come on Tuesday night. Okay, we need to end this.
Becky, when we started this process, he owned the land. Now he doesn't. Do we have a copy of the lease?
We do have a copy of the lease that's in your packet. It's under affidavit of posting and historical information. It's both in front of you. It's page 3 of 150, but it's also in your assembly packet with some page number in the.
We also
300s.
included the deed. The deed is behind it.
And Chairman, that's normal procedure in restaurants all across the country. Make a deal with someone to build a building on some land they own and then they lease it back. And so that's not unusual at all.
Okay, well, we're going to be talking about this lots in a few days. For